What is LARP? Oh baby, don't hurt me. Don't hurt me no more. Hey you, yes you, the person who's stuck inside due to forces outside your control instead of your own crippled social anxiety, lack of discipline/motivations, and your overwhelming need to complain about everything despite having the ability to change your own circumstances. Yes you! Well guess what? I believe in you. Do you want to get into shape or lose weight but think dumbbells are dumb? Think treadmills are treading on thin ice? Push-ups are too pushy? Then get ready to LARP, you beautiful dorks. I'm going to show you how to LARP. So what is LARP? Well, if you're watching this video, you probably already know, but if you found yourself stumbling into this video like a guy stumbling across an extra chip in a box of chicken nuggets, then it stands for Live Action Roleplay. So what's that mean? It means you roleplay in real life. It means you pretend to be something you're not, which shouldn't be too hard for most of you anyways, considering you never let anyone see you for who you really are. Like YouTubers who put on a fake personality to trick people on the internet into thinking they're smarter, more well-adjusted, and charismatic than they actually are. Maybe you're embarrassed or worried what your friends might think of you and your hobbies, but I say if they laugh at you for what you enjoy, then you need better friends. Just remember, you don't have to hide who you really are, because at the end of the day, people will either like you or not, no matter what you do. But if you act like the real you in real life, then people will like you for you and not for the fake person you pretend to be. So if that's all the case, what's the difference between that and role-playing indoors with dice and books? Because it takes place outdoors where you move your feet. Wait, what do you mean parlor LARPs and model UNs are a thing? The actual difference, in my opinion, is more obvious if you really think about the name. It's called live action, not turn-based action, not pause until you can decide what to do next, or occasional live action dialogue bits broken up into pausing to roll skills and attack rolls. It's called live action roleplay. Unless they're role-playing patient characters like your mother's endless hope that you'll become a productive member of society, no one's going to wait for you to do your stuff. You just got to do what you do in real life. Just do it, do it, do it now! Be good to your mother. While every LARP is different, most ask you to wear a specific kind of costume. Also, I find most LARPs don't like calling what you wear as costumes. May be seen as children running around playing make-believe. We're fully grown. Some people feel that LARP as a hobby is that weirdo you're friends with, just so you don't have to seem so weird in comparison, like how the casual video gamer might view other nerds. Sure, I might play video games, but at least I don't roll dice in a basement like a D&D nerd. Sure, I play D&D, but at least I don't throw around beanbags like a loser LARPer. Sure, I might be a LARPer, but at least I'm not... I was going to say something about humor, but I'm not going to insult those guys. They're freaking scary. Point is, don't judge people based solely on their hobbies. As long as they're not hurting each other and having fun, then who cares how they spend their free time? Congratulations, you now know what LARP is. LARP can build a bridge. Have you found a LARP local to you? Good. Now all you have to do is go there, introduce yourself, and make a good impression. Dress right, clean yourself up, and be confident, and I'm sure everyone will love you. Your mother already loves you, and she probably does it for a good reason, so don't disappoint her. And if being a LARPer disappoints her, then don't fear, I'm sure she loves you anyways. And if she doesn't, then you shouldn't be trying to gain her approval anyways. Who cares about her? Go LARP! Find some good friends to love and support you, and be happy! But besides being actually there in person, you need to roleplay a different character now. That's right, you have to choose a character and make a backstory, a vessel in which to channel your new identity. Get ready, because I'm going to show you how to LARP. Due to how many genres LARP as a medium encompasses, the following advice will be fairly broad. The upside to that is that it's so broad that you might be able to take this advice and apply it to other role-playing genres, and even creative writing if you so choose to. Anyways, the first thing you need to do is look at the LARP you're entering and figure out what kind of character fits into that world. Most of that will be covered by the specific LARP you choose to attend. My advice is to be as original as you can. Don't copy anyone. Copying's bad, and you should feel bad for it. Sure, you can roleplay Geralt of Rivia or Geralt of Olivia, but I guarantee eyes will roll if you do. Original YouTube video. Please don't steal. You also have to keep in mind that LARP is a game where real-life actions have an impact. In D&D, you can miss if your dice roll screws you over no matter how skillful your character's supposed to be. In a video game with hit chances, a 99% chance to hit will sometimes still have a 100% chance to miss just because of some unforeseen consequence in the underlying code. In LARP, however, if you hit someone, you actually hit them. In other words, if you run slow or can't aim for shit, then don't bother telling everyone about your badass backstory in which you slayed all the dragons, won all the tournaments, and laid all the bitches, because it'll just sound like you're making stuff up to get attention. And yes, I realize this is a LARP, so all the backstories are made up. Even my backstory of being a humble farmer is made up. I don't know the first thing about farming beyond water make plant go big and good eat. Okay, real talk. If you're new to the hobby and you want to get better and learn, I recommend playing a character who also wants to get better and learn and is new to the adventuring business. They don't have to have a long backstory in that case. Your first few weeks or months at the LARP is your backstory. In other words, your new character should be as smart and as skilled as you are, making them easy to roleplay. It's what I did and I think it went quite well. In conclusion, don't make your character more powerful than what you can display on field. But what about appearances? Can you tell people how you look even if you don't actually look look anything like your roleplay character? And I say, why the hell not? If you want to roleplay a handsome, pretty person, then go for it. If I have to pretend those fake plastic tips on your ears make you an elf, then you have to pretend my ugly mug is irresistible, because it is. Everyone deserves to feel pretty, even you. You're fucking pretty. Tell your friends they're pretty. Tell your mother they're pretty. Tell everyone they're pretty. I want to be pretty too. Congratulations, now you know how to build a LARP character. Both of us knowing LARP is a battlefield. Want to chop up your fictional enemies and give your fictional friends bruises? Want to compensate for something using a longsword? Want to lug around armor to work on your glutes? Then I have the class for you. Get ready to learn how to use a warrior, because I'm going to show you how to LARP. Not all LARPs use a class system, but the idea of a warrior in a fantasy-based LARP is common enough that you should be able to play one in one form or another. All warriors hit things with sharp or blunt objects, sure, but there are so many different flavors of stabbing and smashings. You can have a screaming barbarian, loyal knights, or showy gladiators, just to name a few. For the most part, every warrior will be judged on their martial skills, and the different weapons they choose will determine how you fight. Generally speaking, unless you're playing in a full contact hardcore system, the way your weapon works in LARP will never approach anything you see in real life. For example, in real life, kicking someone in the balls, disarming them, or tackling a heavily armored opponent to the ground before stabbing them in an exposed area is a great way to win a fight. In most LARPs, however, you can't do that, since there's a chance you'll either end up actually hurting the other player or damaging your weapons and equipment. Keep in mind, we're assuming we're using LARP-safe equipment, stuff made out of foam and such. Why is foam so expensive? To that end, unless there's a specific rule in your LARP that says otherwise, axes suck. Unlike the sword, which has decent reach and a guard for tiny little fingers, the main advantage of an axe in real life is its striking power, something that's not really accounted for in the LARP. Spears are good in real life since you outrange most melee fighters, and one or two stabs is enough to take anyone down. However, in a LARP where HP exists, people with enough hit points can just keep advancing after taking a couple hits and get in real close, making the point of a spear useless. Sure, they might work in a team-based setting where your allies can stop enemies from reaching inside your guard, but like I said earlier, unless the rules say they do extra damage, there's basically no point in using them in a one-on-one fight. Then you have shields. In real life, shields can be broken and worked around due to their weight. A foam shield in LARP is light, and once again, assuming your LARP doesn't have a specific rule for them, is indestructible, negating many of their real-life weaknesses. A warrior with a two-handed weapon has a similar issue to spears. They have better reach than a normal sword, but as I've said again and again, unless your LARP has a specific rule giving it extra damage like an axe or something, then there's almost no point in using them over, say, a sword and shield, aka the best combo ever. If you want to win harder at LARP as a warrior, then I suggest getting metal armor. For those of you who don't know, in most LARPs, having more armor doesn't reduce the amount of damage you take, it just gives you more hit points. So even if they keep hitting your unarmored foot, you can still take more hits than the guy who gets struck in his armored chest, as long as you have more armor covering the rest of your body. If you have 3 times as many hit points as the other guy, you'll still beat them even if they hit you twice as many times as you hit them. It's just basic maths. In the end, LARP is just another pay-to-win game, so spend some money, get out there and win. Congratulations, now you know how to be a warrior in LARP. LARP heals. A healer in a video game is that class that everyone wants in their team but doesn't want to be themselves. Super important to not dying but not impactful in any obvious way outside of very specific circumstances and thus detrimental to anyone who wants to be the center of attention. Luckily, LARP isn't a video game. You don't have to be just the guy who only throws around bandages in a fight. There's nuance. Nuance that can be easy to miss if you're new to the hobby and don't know a real sword from a foam sword. Luckily for you, I've taken the liberty of licking all the swords so I know which is which, and I'm also here to show you why the healer is the best goddamn character to play in LARP. So get ready because I'm going to show you how to be a healer in LARP. A lot of you who saw my previous video in LARP probably look at me and think I'm a warrior due to my armor, shield and sword, but I think it'd shock you to discover that I'm actually a healer. That's right, I'm a freaking healer and proud of it. I have bandages, healing potions, a winged amulet lets me magically heal people for 3 times a day, and an enchanted scarf that lets me heal everyone who can hear my voice, not to mention the ability to cure people of their ailments. Also, I have candy for good girls and boys who don't get blood all over my boots. If it weren't for the germs and the socially questionable act of doing so, I'd be handing out candy to everyone. Now, if you're wondering why I'm not wearing priest robes or plague doctor's masks, it's because those guys are easy to kill and you can't heal people if you're dead. Depending on your specific LARP's rules, the armor you wear might not be as effective when you're using the game's version of healing, but if you have the option, then more protection is better. Now, there's also some crossover with mages, but I'll cover the people alive. And yes, there's a distinction to be made. Don't get me wrong, having someone in front of you stop arrows making a new home in your face is important, but useful to have on your side. You can heal for money, heal for friendship, or an unspoken favor, the kind where you tell them that they don't owe you anything, but they totally do, because if they don't, maybe you'll stop healing them when they need it most. Or maybe you just heal for science. Any motivation is valid in LARP. And of course, this being a LARP means you don't have to sacrifice your fighting skills at the expense of your healing powers. Ignoring LARPs that give you the ability to deal 1 million damage when you shout certain words at someone, you can learn to dodge, block, and dish out sword strikes quickly and as well as any other non-healer type out there if you practice enough. Just a quick tip to anyone who thinks it's a good idea to paint red crosses across your armor. It's actually a bad idea and it's technically against international law, so don't do it. And if you do, you better know how to actually give first aid and all that stuff. Don't believe me? Look it up. I've put a link in the description, and if you're watching this, you probably have internet access anyway, so do it. You have no excuses. Last piece of advice, you can only be a healer in LARP if you yourself are healthy in real life. So stay safe, eat well, and don't put yourself in unnecessary danger. Be good to you. LARP is a hobby, not a life or death activity, so treat it as such. And if you do actually get hurt, make sure you're fully healed, get a doctor if you need it, and then come back to LARP when you're fully good to go. Congratulations, now you know how to be a healer in LARP. Well, you stole my heart, and that's a sin, but in this case I hope you win. LARP, thief, that's what you are. Sneaky, leather-clad thieves that will just as likely take your gold as they take your lives. Wearing black and shrouded in mystery, the rogue strikes when you least suspect. I've delved into the secret lives of rogues to tell you how they work and how you can play as one, so get ready because I'm going to show you how to be a rogue in LARP. So the idea of a rogue comes in all shapes and sizes. They can be deadly assassins, cat burglars who only steal, never harm, and then you have the con artists to make it their business to come in all shapes and sizes. So how do you identify a rogue then, asks your friend. Is it the poison-sipping, dagger-twirling, leather-wearing punk or the church-visiting, puppy-petting gentleman who never seems to lie? If you answer to one of these questions, then you're wrong. It's the friend who asked you the question in the first place. Never let your guard down to anyone, because the real rogue is actually behind you, kneeling over, waiting for your buddies to push you over so they can steal your lunch money, your breakfast money, and probably your dinner money too, assuming you don't have any meals cooked by your mother, that is. If you're going to be a rogue, it's all well and good doing it on your own. But there's a reason why a lot of media uses the age-old trope of thieves' guilds, and that's because rogues swipe the goods while Flirty Shirley distracts the shopkeeper, and if the guards come by, then leave it to Bob. Bob is no one special, he's just the fall guy you blame when everything hits the fan, and it will hit the fan. My point is, unless it's specifically part of the con, don't go around telling everyone you're a thief. A rogue's best advantage is the fact that no one expects them, so if you start advertising the fact that you're a rogue, you've just given up half your advantage for no real reason. Speaking of giving up an advantage, don't just fight people with a piddly little dagger. That's your backup holdout utility weapon. Try fighting someone using a dagger while they're swinging a greatsword in LARP and you're going to lose unless they're feeling particularly merciful. Use a short sword or a rapier, both equally roguish weapons, and you can tell people you're a warrior if they ask. So make sure you carry around a real weapon, and some armor too. If you're hiding behind cover, you don't magically become more visible if you're wearing metal armor, and if your friends are also wearing metal armor, you can camouflage with them, like a zebra. Besides that, you're going to be friendly in equal measure, and if you need to break some legs, then so be it. Also, just because you're a rogue doesn't mean you need to break contracts, promises, and deals all the time. If you're out of LARP, it means it's a small community, and if it's a small community, it means people are going to catch on eventually. Even if those same people play as different characters and thus would not know about your roguish ways in character, their subconsciousness will scream at them not to trust you, even if they do everything in their power to avoid meta-knowledge. Don't be coy, just keep pretending you're something you're not. If you're already LARPing, that makes it easier. In other words, all you have to do is pretend to be a fictional character who's pretending to be another fictional character, and if you're already hiding your true personality from all your LARPing buddies, you just have to pretend to be someone you aren't, who's pretending to be a fictional character, who's pretending to be another fictional character, who's pretending to be someone they aren't. Easy! Congratulations, now you know how to play a rogue in LARP. LARP magic, LARP magic. Don't fight the feeling, just let it happen to you. Ever think about wielding the arcane arts? How about burning all your enemies from afar? Want to do it in real life with the power of your imagination enforced by a rule set that everyone has to agree to but in some cases ignore, misinterpret, or misunderstand? Then you'll want to be a mage. Get ready, because I'm going to show you how to use magic in LARP. Oh boy, this is gonna be a tough one. Being a warrior or rogue is easy enough. They're just two different flavors of stabbing someone, and just about every LARP supports stabbings. I know I do. The act of hitting someone counts as you hitting them, and the act of you dodging a blow means you're completely fine, and that's pretty universal no matter which LARP you go to. Magic, however, is a bit more diverse, meaning there's no real unified advice that I can give that'll help you be a mage in every single LARP, but screw it, I'm gonna try anyways. So most LARPs understand that we can't actually summon up literal balls of flame, the same way we understand that you can't actually stab each other with real sharpened bits of metal. Since we're forbidden from practicing real magic and literally burning our friends alive, we have to compensate with our imaginations and other non-imaginative stand-ins. Sometimes you just have to point at someone and they have to pretend that they've been hit with a beam of magic. Sometimes props are used, like bits of rope being placed on the ground to represent a firewall, or a ribbon tied around a sword to show that it's been enchanted, or more commonly little harmless balls of foam used as magic missiles or other projectile-based spells. These little thrown stand-ins are normally preceded by shouting the spell's name, so the unfortunate bastard who's about to burst into flames will know how loud they have to pretend shout, to pretend die when hit by your pretend magic when being hit by a pretend fire, because it probably feels different from being struck by lightning, doused in a spray of acid, or blasted by pure magic. Problem is, foam balls are made from foam, which means you have to depend on the mage being loud when casting it. After all, a fully armored knight wearing solid steel armor will find it more difficult to notice a soft foam ball hitting them unless their attention is on said soft foam ball, and even if they do notice they're being hit by it, how will they know what they're being hit by? Is it a fireball, lightning bolt, or a super death blast? And yes, that's a real magic spell. I made it up and therefore it's real. What, do I need to spell it out for you? The other problem with this is if you're casting a spell by shouting it, you better believe that it's going to make you a prime target, or at least give a warning for everyone in spell casting distance to dodge or find cover. Trust me when I say everyone appreciates the warning when you scream like that. In conclusion, communication is the most important part of Larp. The organizers have to communicate the rules of the game to you, then you have to communicate to the other players what you're doing, just like how you have to communicate with your parents more. They miss you, wonder if you're alright, and worry if you're eating enough. Give them a call, because communication and having a good relationship with your family is the real magic. If your family is toxic, however, then please ignore the last piece of advice. Instead, maybe try to reach out to your friend who you haven't contacted in a long while. I'm sure they miss you as much as you miss them. Congratulations, now you know how to be a mage in Larp. Let Larp be the leader. Let it take control of your mind and your body. For all of those of you who follow my channel, I know what it's like to have the responsibility of leadership. I know what it's like to have a legion of people move at my command and kneel in fealty, and it's my responsibility to teach you how to lead people into battle. So get ready everyone and listen up, because I'm going to show you how to be a leader in Larp. Now, I can't tell you about every style of leadership or which one's best, but I can tell you about my own personal experience. As I mentioned in the intro, I know what it's like to be a leader. In fact, the position was passed down to me by the very guy who recruited me in the first place. He transferred leadership over to me once he noticed I had a few victories under my belt whenever I found myself as a senior member on the field of battle. People just seemed to listen to my orders for some reason, and I gotta say I felt like less of a leader and more of a stressed out dad with a dozen kids running around complaining about each other. Half the time, my biggest enemy wasn't the opposing factions, but the individual members within my very own guild at each other's throats. It was like being a shepherd for a herd of particularly violent and well-armed cats. There were days I felt like I couldn't do anything right, that everything was going wrong with everyone bringing up my mistakes and teasing me, and somehow, they all thought I was doing a good job. Despite my followers' chaotic nature, they were still loyal and respected me, a respect I returned with my own, doing my best to help them. Now that I think about it, it kind of felt like I was playing Commander Shepard sometimes, doing my companions' side quests that they'd send me on. Keep in mind that LARP is just a hobby, a place to have fun, and a lot of people seem to forget that. You can't just abuse your authority and the power they've given you, because at the end of the day, that authority and power only goes as far as until they decide to either quit the hobby or join a different faction. Now don't get me wrong, if you're role-playing a character who would abuse that power, then go nuts, but the key word here is roleplay. Be as evil as you want in the game, but when it's time to go back to the real world, leave that abusive shit behind. You shouldn't retain any authority out of character. Sure, people might look up to you as a mentor, especially the newer players, but at the end of the day, you're everyone's equal in having fun. Some people find it fun to roleplay a soldier in the army where their captain yells at them like a drill sergeant, while some people don't appreciate that at all. Some people enjoy loyally serving a king with honor, while others prefer a more equal and casual relationship with their leader. I'm not telling you to bend over backwards for your followers' whims, I'm just saying that you should play the character and leader that's most fun for you. Keep in mind, however, if you want to play a tyrant, just be ready for people, your followers included, to treat you like a tyrant. Just because you're in charge doesn't mean people won't betray you. I've had people leave my service before, but never have they backstabbed me in the process. In fact, a lot of previous members who left before I was in charge told me that they would have stayed if I was the leader earlier, and many people who never wanted to join my faction joined just for me. Hell, the folks who left my service are still my allies when I last played as a leader. It also probably helped that I shared candy with everyone. You heard it here, folks. Bribery works. One last piece of advice. If you're going to be a leader, you don't have to be the best fighter in the mercenary band. You don't have to be the smartest mage in the tower, and you don't have to be the sneakiest rogue in the Thieves Guild. You just have to be the best leader in the group. So get out there and lead, you beautiful nerds. Go forth and LARP in my name. Hiya! Congratulations, you now know how to be a leader in LARP. Cause I can't make you LARP me if you don't. The idea of NPCs or non-playable characters is such an odd concept in LARP. By their very definition as non-playable characters, they shouldn't have anyone play them, yet here we are in LARP having real people play them. In other words, the actual wording of NPCs shouldn't be taken so literally, which I'll explain with my big brain in this very video, so get ready because I'm going to show you how to LARP. As mentioned before, the idea of an NPC in LARPs is weird. In video games, they're just characters you don't play, the allies you help, and the enemies you fight. In tabletop RPGs, they're the characters that your game master controls, but for LARPs, they're controlled directly by the individuals. Some people will argue all day that you can't have NPCs in LARPs, but to them I say they're dumb, and that the definition of NPCs isn't to be taken so literally in the context of LARPs. And if you want to argue the etymology of something, maybe pick a battle that doesn't involve man-sized adults running around waving foam swords at each other. And if my pronunciation of etymology bugs you, then you're not the only one. Anyways, to me an NPC is someone who has a specific predefined role in the world of the game. Now don't get me wrong, the normal players can be the rough equivalents of protagonists and antagonists, but it's the NPCs that give structure and filling to the narrative cake. To put it another way, they're the folks with a script that they have to follow. Oftentimes, NPCs are the monsters that you slay en masse before respawning. Despite looking exactly the same, the one that respawns is supposed to be a completely different monster, so even if you have only 5 goblins running around, it's actually an army of 500, and the other 495 have just gotten lost until one of the original 5 happens to conveniently die. If you want to be a monster NPC, then it's usually an easy way to focus on the more combat side of things while ignoring things like being diplomatic or friendly with other players. You don't have to roleplay as much and just focus on fighting, a sort of violent training wheel if you will. Sure, you can bring some backstory and character to your NPC, but we all know that they're just going to be stabbed and looted at the end of the day, so don't even worry about it. To that end, who's the real monster? The answer is whoever has monster written on their character sheet. Duh. But if your LARP doesn't use a character sheet, then how do you tell? The answer is whoever has to use a combination of more than 3 pieces of prosthetics / makeup to represent their races, or a full face mask which for this purpose counts as 3 pieces of prosthetics / makeup. Wearing 2 bits of pointy ears, you're lucky it's not 3, but I'm watching you, elf. Have 2 horns and red skin? Then you're clearly a demonic monster. An NPC's role is to facilitate and create such structure for the world to make it feel more alive. NPCs are essentially the background or side characters. They can be the king who gives quests to the courageous adventurers or the baker on the street selling their wares. Generally, LARP systems either make friendly NPCs either super vulnerable and easy to kill, or super invincible, going as far as to create an anti-violence field often enforced by magic. Which of course means that everyone is going to try and find loopholes and ways around it so they can fulfill their fantasies of being murder hobos. If you're just starting out in LARP, then being an NPC can be an easy way to get into roleplaying without having to invest too much into the new character, and if you like the NPC enough, then there's no reason why you can't change the NPC into a fully fledged playable character as long as they're not too powerful. Just remember, no matter how you have fun in LARP, it's just important that you It's a different kind of LARP that we've been dreaming of. It's a different kind of LARP. In hindsight, I probably should have told you all about the different kinds of LARPs in the first place. And because this is the only guide to LARP on the internet, you folks probably think combat-heavy sword and sorcery stuff is the only thing on the market. Sure, I've made mention to other kinds of LARPs like model UNs and the like, but because they're only passing mentions, I'm sure you've dismissed them all as unimportant by now. Well, I'm here to enlighten you all and open your eyes to the other possibilities that exists. So get ready because I'm going to show you how to LARP. Just so your brain doesn't explode and I don't get sued for exploding your skulls, let's start with fantasy LARPs. For the most part, you'll have people running around with swords, bows, and magic wands, throwing around great balls of foam at each other, pretending they're using spells. However, every LARP, even their individual genres, can be divided up into a million different ways. Broadly speaking, some LARPs are more roleplay oriented in terms of how magic works. In some of those systems, if you act out a spell enough, the people receiving the effects of said spell will behave differently. Saying, "I cast Fireball," and throwing a beanbag at a guy in armor, he'll probably just say, "Ow!" and proceed to murder your magical ass. Instead of doing that, you can also say,
"Through the powers of the 9 hells, I summon the fiery, unquenching wrath of the Quasalis demon hordes itself to burn away your life and soul,"
while waving your hands around, and the other guy will probably scream in pain as they pretend their entire world is on fire. Either that, or they'll just proceed to murder your magical ass while it takes you 2 hours to actually cast that spell. Some LARPs tell you not to grab the other people's stuff, shield bash, or go for the face, since these actions might lead to actual injury or the breaking of $100 equipment. Seriously, why the hell is foam so freaking expensive? Anyways, in the more hardcore LARPs, you're allowed to disarm enemies, shield bash, and go for the face, but they're still LARPing, and for the most part using foam weapons too. These specific kind of LARPers are one step short of HEMA players. Does that mean softer, less hardcore LARPs are bad? Of course not. People in those LARPs keep the health insurance premiums down and usually have less cases of their $100 foam swords breaking. Seriously, why the hell are they so fucking expensive? Then you have sci-fi LARPs, military LARPs, and historical LARPs to name a few, most of which use toy guns of some sort. Just like costumes and kit, they don't like calling them toy guns because it makes them sound like children, and instead usually call them something else like, blasters. Pew pew! Then you have people who live in a modern hell where food is hard to come by, safety is a foreign concept, and the collapse of society is either imminent or already happening. Anyways, enough about real life, let's talk about the post-apocalyptic genre. Maybe a nuke went off, maybe there's a big oil war, or maybe the world's supply of jello shots went missing, I don't know. Point is, you can wear what you're wearing right now to these kinds of LARPs. Just slap on some dirt, rip up some fabric, and stop washing for a few months. Okay, that's actually a bad idea. Having something look dirty is fine and all, but you should actually make sure it's hygienic. Just because you don't get sick from dried sweat stains doesn't mean your friend can't. Think of them and adjust accordingly. Some LARPs rely more on mechanical systems in that players literally shout out how much damage they're doing, while others depend solely on dodging and hitting as their only skills. Some LARPs focus on the objective and doing everything you can to win the fight, focusing on raw numbers to do it, while others take a more laid-back, story-driven approach. Some LARPs are more open, with player-driven stories, while others have a stricter controlled narrative that is controlled by a single person or a small group. Then you have parlor LARPs, model UNs, and arguably murder mysteries, where everybody just sits around and just talks. Those sorts of interactions, which sounds really boring to me. I mean, seriously, who'd want to roleplay that way and not move around? Now, if you excuse me, I have an important D&D game to play with some friends. Congratulations, now you know about the different kinds of LARPs. Take a moment to think of just, flexibility, LARP, and trust. Take a moment to think of just flexibility, LARP, and trust. Whew. Okay, so this specific episode is going to have a slightly more serious introduction in it than my other videos due to the very nature of this topic. Generally speaking, when you have two people disagree with each other, they can usually talk things out. But if they get heated up enough in a community like LARP, then the effects can be very visible and damaging to the game itself, even to those who aren't directly involved with said argument in the first place. My advice is to remember that it's a hobby and that it's okay to leave if you feel like it's become too toxic, and that it's not your responsibility to fix it, no matter how invested you are in it. But you also have to understand that if you're the problem, then the mature thing to do is to admit that and try to be a better person. Communication is key. My point is, if you do try to fix it, then go ahead, but don't hurt yourself in the process. Be good to you and look after yourself. Remember that once again, LARP is a hobby, and if it stops feeling like a hobby because of a select few people, then go to a different LARP. And if LARP itself stops feeling like a hobby, then maybe think about taking a break from it, at least for a little while. Anyways, with that out of the way, let's go back to our usual programming where I talk really fast and get ready because I'm going to show you how to LARP! Okay, nerds, what is drama? Why does it pertain to LARP? Well, according to a quick internet search, it's a noun. 1. A play for theatre, radio, or television, which isn't really relevant to us all. The second definition is a lot more helpful. 2. An exciting, emotional, or unexpected event or circumstance. In other words, it's an argument. Sure, you can go. Now, everyone who thinks they're trash is wrong. Still think you're trash and that I'm wrong? Well, if you're trash, you must be wrong. And if you're wrong, you can't be trash at all. And if you're right, how can I be trash? It's not trash can't, it's trash can. Bam, you're now part of some drama. Isn't it exciting? Don't you just crave the conflict? One of the largest sources of drama you might find in a LARP is accusations of cheating. Maybe someone uses more spells than they're supposed to. Maybe someone strikes someone harder and causes a real injury. Maybe someone uses an ability that they aren't supposed to have. And if these things happen, how do the accused players react? They could say that the other person is lying. They could say it's an honest mistake. Or they could claim that they were following the rules and that the other person hasn't read said rules properly. On the surface level, who do you trust? What if the accusation was made against you? What if you witnessed someone cheating yourself? What if the accused is telling the truth? What do you do? My advice? Be an adult. Treat this like your workplace because we all know that LARP is just a second job. Talk to them, sit them down and try to come to a compromise and understanding. If that doesn't work, then go to HR or the folks in charge and report them. If that doesn't work, join a union and demand some changes. If that doesn't work, quit your job and start up your own business or join a competitor. And if they beg you to come back, offer them consulting fees 10 times your original pay. Seriously though, you shouldn't participate in LARP for the drama. While drama does have an incredibly high chance of occurring in the LARP hobby compared to some others, it should never be the focus of the hobby itself. Most importantly though, drama shouldn't be ignored. It should be dealt with. Congratulations, now you know about LARP drama. Giving up on your LARP because People play LARP for many reasons. Sometimes they just like hitting things, but don't want to be hit back hard enough for their bones to break. Sometimes they like being surrounded by other weirdos while complimenting each other's outfits. Sometimes you want to fulfill your fantasy of being a good person, or just let go and watch the world burn. Sometimes you just want to roleplay the alignment you want. So get ready, because I'm going to show you how to LARP. The world is morally grey, with good people doing bad things for the right reasons, and bad people doing good things for the wrong reasons. Sometimes there are good people doing good things for the right reasons, and bad people doing bad things for the right reasons. Or the wrong reasons, I'm not entirely sure anymore. But as the old saying goes, everyone's the protagonist of their own story. Good and evil is rarely the question in here. Turns out, real life is grey enough that thinking of things in black and white is a depressingly popular fantasy. The fact that video games and your other hobbies often share this black and white view make them that much more desirable and easier to stomach. Why have a deep character with interesting set of motivations when you can just make them hit bad people because they're bad? I'm not trying to write a novel here, I'm trying to play make-believe with expensive foam weapons. Why are foam weapons so expensive? Now don't get me wrong, having a deep character with a long backstory is cool and all, but in a live-action environment like LARP, it rarely comes up unless you like monologuing, in which case you're either evil or a narcissist. So, how can you play a good and evil character then? You're probably asking, freebie wits, how can I reduce the complicated moral spectrum into an easily digestible checklist? Well, you can't. It's impossible. But I can do it for you. If you want to be a good aligned warrior, then everyone knows you can never lie. You must wield a sword and have shiny armor. Want to be a good wizard? That's fine too, but you have to be wise and give cryptic advice. Want to be a good aligned rogue? Then you can't stab anyone. A good rogue is comedic relief. You're there to steal golden hearts, never lives. Your job is to make harebrained get-rich schemes that will inevitably fail, hence the comedic relief part. Want to be a good aligned healer? Then bam, just wear white and stay out of the way of the actual fighters. Maybe sacrifice your life to save the warrior or something. But why be a good person when you can play an evil person in LARP? Sure, you can be evil in real life, but getting dogpiled by local law enforcement hurts, and prison seems pretty undesirable if the movies are to be believed. Anyways, back to LARP. Want to be an evil warrior? Have horns on your helmet and paint everything black. If you're not trying to fight everyone in a 1-1 duel to prove your might, you're doing it wrong. Want to be an evil wizard? Then you also need horns on your head and paint everything black. The more you talk about death, souls, and embracing stuff, the better. Want to be an evil rogue? Wear a hood. Horns are optional, but you still need to wear black. For you, stabbing isn't a question. It's when. And if it's not now, it's when the other person isn't looking at you. Backstabbing isn't just a verb for you, it's a way of life. Want to be a bad healer? Then stop healing. Your job is to be a creepy scientist type person who experiments on innocent little furry creatures while healing them. If you want to hurt things while not actually killing them, then you want to be an evil healer. Still consider yourself a warrior, wizard, rogue, or healer, but don't fall into any of these stereotypes? Congratulations, you're a background character and your alignment is neutral at best. What? You thought alignments had a sliding scale somewhere? Well, you thought wrong. This is a LARP, not a freaking fish market. You want a sliding scale? Go buy 40 pounds of tuna or something. Why would you want 40 pounds of tuna? I don't know, you're the weirdo buying it. Congratulations, now you know how to be good or evil in LARP. This is the last LARP song I'll ever write for you. All things must come to an end. LARPs, backstories, warriors, healers, rogues, mages, leaders, NPCs, games, controversies, good, bad, and everything in between. It doesn't matter. Everything just has to end. It's an unhappy truth of life sometimes. And just like this series, sometimes LARP characters have to end as well. So welcome everyone to the final and thematically appropriate episode. For the last time ever, get ready because I'm going to show you how to LARP. We all saw it coming. Frankly, I was running out of material for this series. Not that I'd ever admit out loud, so forget I said anything. I'm smart and 100% original. I'm a fan of ideas that'll never run out. I have a million more episodes in my brain vault ready to go, and I'm holding all back so other YouTubers can still get some viewers. However, occasionally I get tired of a specific idea, no matter how awesome it is, and in the end, that's what a fictional character is. An idea that happened to take a life of their own. Sure, you can spice it up and give it new life in a different form, but that doesn't mean the original idea has to go on forever, or that it even should. I might like eating curry, but I refuse to eat it every day for each meal. If I did eat it all the time, I'd eventually associate the burning spice on my tongue with the burning spice on my lower tongue, if you know what I mean, and I'd likely never look at it twice my fragile stomach. Point is, some have any meaningful impact unless it's specifically built into the world. You have to talk to the organizers about organizing a way to have this character named King Rex and his lost. Perfect. Anyways, in the story, the enemy had found a way to permanently end him in an unholy ritual, and it was our job to stop them. We stood against the tide, foiling ambushes, sieges, and assassination attempts at every corner. It was a valiant effort, and we made them work for it. But make no mistake, it was a bitter defeat. A defeat that ended with King Rex's permanent death. Out of character, the player who killed him was very sad about it, since they were actually the best of friends in real life. The guy who died didn't die in real life, of course, but the atmosphere surrounding the entire group and community felt like it. In reality, he was just going to leave the state for work, but that didn't soften the blow. His absence would be felt, as he was a very well-loved member of the community. Continuing on, the idea of having a character death can be pretty appealing to narcissists, as it allows you to have a funeral for yourself and hear people talking about you without actually having to die. But you don't always have to have your character die when you need them to leave the LARP. In theory, you can have your character retire, as in literally have them retire instead of the mob version of retiring, which is a pretty acceptable way to end a character for one last quest if need be. This is especially great if you're an anxious ball of indecisive decision making, as this allows you to have your cake and eat it too, which I've never really understood. Why would you have a cake if you aren't going to eat it? Are you just going to pin on the wall and look at it all day? Just because a character's leaving doesn't mean you have to be sad about it. Sure, if you love the character and your friends love the character, it's going to be a sad time, but they can be happy that they got a happy ending in the time they spent together. It's what I did with my character Warren, the one you're looking at right now. Starting out as a cowardly adventurer, he created bonds of friendship that then became their leader, becoming someone that hopefully King Rex would be proud of. He then retired to a humble farm and lived the rest of his days in peace, just like he always wanted to before dying of old as the mascot of my YouTube channel and series. So don't be sad. Be happy for the ending we got. Be happy that there's a complete story to be told. I'm glad that I got to show you how to end your character, and I'm especially glad that I got to show you how to LARP. Thank you for watching and sharing this journey with me. For those of you who already LARP, thank you for putting up with me and my rushed and often satirically incorrect comments. For those of you who want to LARP but haven't yet, I hope I've inspired you to try and that you'll have fun when you finally take that leap. For those of you who just watch my videos but have no real interest in LARPing itself, I thank you and hope you've enjoyed yourself regardless. And finally, for all my friends who LARP with me, who give me feedback and just generally believe in me, I want to thank you even more. So, for the last time, congratulations. You all now know everything there is to know about LARP. Living on LARP, buying on time. I live! That's right, I'm a breathing, talking, animated machine. The afterlife couldn't hold me, and it can keep on trying, because I'll just keep getting back up and doing it all over again. I've been stabbed, blown up by fireballs, and even eaten by a cannibal, and I'm still here. So, welcome to the Resurrected Guide to LARP series, where I, Freebie Wits, show you how to LARP, or more specifically, how to get back up after dying. So get ready everyone, because you're about to get educated in the face. Now before we begin, Season 2 will assume that you've either already watched my entire first season, are already LARPing, or have obsessively consumed all wiki entries on LARPing to the point where you're on some sort of law enforcement agency's database. That said, I'll still be spouting information that'd be common sense to the average LARPer, so newbies aren't left behind, and also I don't have to do too much research. Besides murder mysteries where death is the point for one of the characters, dying is something you should avoid in LARP. You know what's cool? Immortality. All those people who complain about living forever because
life is meaningless without an ending
is the very definition of first world problems. In many fantasy-based LARPs with magic and the like, dying is rarely the end. You just get back up and keep on going. That said, there are still consequences to dying. Sure, the consequences are temporary and many LARPs have different flavors of dealing with them. Some LARPs simply give you a respawn timer like a video game, essentially punishing you by putting you in a timeout because you're bad at dodging fireballs or are too good at catching them with your every body part at the same time. However, this style of life and death can be problematic if you want to play a murderer. There would be no need for a detective because the victim is also the prime witness. If I get shanked by Shanky McShankington, I can just get back up after twiddling my thumbs in timeout heaven and just point out who shanked me with my thumbs. To help combat this, many LARPs introduce amnesia as a mechanic in which someone who comes back to life forgets the last few moments of their life before death. Specific times may vary between systems. Excuse for respawning kicks in. However, sometimes the distance between death zone and the actual place they died might have a bit of travel time. During said travel time, many LARPs tell players that they can't interact with each other. Players don't instantly die either when they hit 0 hit points. No. Sometimes there's a bleed out phase where other players can try to heal, capture, or more likely loot you before your corpse turns incorporeal and literally walks away to respawn later. Games that try to be more realistic sometimes have a permanent injury mechanic upon hitting 0 hit points. These involve stuff like decreased stats or losing the use of certain skills or limbs. In these systems where where death has long-lasting if not permanent consequences, folks are less likely to charge mindlessly into battle and potentially lose hours, days, if not years worth of character development. That said, some people might see these permanent consequences as character development. Then you have LARPs where death is permanent. Compare that to timeout deaths where adventurers throw themselves at a problem, constantly getting themselves killed to fix said problem. So now you know about life and death in LARP. You're welcome! To know him is to LARP, LARP him. Meta-knowledge is that dirty word that a lot of idiots use to describe something that they don't like to ensure everyone plays the same way. It's that seemingly nebulous thing that sucks the fun out of everything, and everybody knows someone who utters those cursed words in the worst possible way without knowing quite what it is. Technically speaking, meta-knowledge isn't actually a bad thing to have, it's how you use the knowledge that make or break the game, and not a lot of people realize it. Well, I'm here to fix that in the most meta way possible, by telling you about the subject while out of character. Okay, not really, I'm still in character. So get ready, because I'm going to tell you how to LARP. So what is meta? For the purposes of LARP, it's knowing that you don't know what you know despite knowing that you know, and knowing that you don't know what you do know. It's basically knowledge that your character doesn't have, even if you, the person controlling said character, does. So despite being a weapon master, your warrior would not know that a gun shoots fire and thus wouldn't use it as a weapon, unless they bludgeon someone to death with it, that is. It's having your character navigate a maze perfectly that you yourself have visited or designed, but your character is only seeing for the first time. It's having your bloodthirsty barbarian not attack the old beggar who insulted him because you saw the old beggar's character sheet and know he's got 1,000,000 hit points and unlimited uses of an instant death spell. Sometimes the lines between role-playing and metagaming can be very thin depending on how you word things. For example, metagaming would be a character saying, "A fireball does 3 damage and you should be on 2 hit points and the next hit should kill you." A roleplayer, however, might say, "A fireball would kill an unarmored person instantly but would require at least 2 direct hits to kill someone like you," or something along those lines. Depending on how close you skirt the edge, suspicion on metagaming might still hound you, so some people purposely play dumb to avoid it, doing things like walking into a trap your friend was complaining about when you shouldn't have been able to hear him complain in character on the count of them being dead, for example. So with all the doom and gloom about meta being terrible, what did I mean when I said meta could be good if used properly? Well, to start with, headshots. In many LARPs, hitting someone in the head is against the rules. However, there's no reason for us as characters to not aim for the head, since a good blow to the noggin can end a battle quickly. Because of this, we are all technically metagaming, to avoid what our characters might do to avoid the head, even if it becomes an easy target for whatever reason. Another reason I'm using meta properly is story. If your friend shares with you a storyline that they want to play through that starts with you both meeting up in a forest despite having no previous reason to go to said forest and you go to said forest, that's technically metagaming. But it's not the kind that anyone would criticize you for. Like everything in LARP, everything can be taken advantage of, but if it contributes to the fun of the group, then you're doing a good job. So now you know about metagaming. You're welcome! LARP! LARP changes everything. Remember back in the first episode when I was brought back to life? Wanna guess how it happened? Well, let's put it this way. It wasn't through the power of healing magic, necromancy, or some paltry godlike power. No. I've been resurrected with the power of retcons. With retcons, I never even died in the first place. So welcome to the second season of I'm Gonna Show You How to LARP. Brought to you by retcons. With that out of the way, we're talking about retcons, specifically why they're used, when they can be used, and if they should be used at all. When I refer to a retcon, I'm not talking about putting a previous event in a new light with previously unavailable information, like a bad guy turning out to be a good guy the entire time. I'm talking about changing the events wholesale. In other bits of media, this can be explained away with reboots, plot holes, or even writers trying to cover said plot holes with narrative cement. On screen or in a book, this can be easy enough in that the audience doesn't have any direct input or views that can change the direction of the show. I mean, if the audience complains about it enough, it'll change in the future, but the original retcon has already been shown and can't be directly interfered with. Point is, to have a retcon go forwards, in most forms of media, you don't need the audience to agree with it. It's not a democracy, it's not sure what kind of political system this would fall under. Tyranny? Monarchy? Doesn't matter. For LARPs, for a retcon to work, it requires everyone who participated in the original event to agree. Even acknowledging the original events can throw everything into chaos, not the kind where everyone wears skulls and drinks blood kind of chaos either. This kind of ties into the metagaming episode I did previously, and now that I think about it, a lot of my future topics kind of tie into each other quite a bit as well. Not because I'm trying to tie everything into a cohesive series of educational videos, but because I ran out of ideas and had to split a single idea into several, and Let's just redo that, shall we?
Retconned.
Retconned! This kind of ties into the metagaming episode I did previously, and if you watch the rest of Season 2, you'll see the concept carried over as I tie everything together into a cohesive series of educational videos. Which was the plan all along. Moving on, retcons are usually a sign of a lazy or unfocused writing team, ones that don't keep track of their own lore. That said, no matter how detail-focused a person is, they'll eventually make a mistake, especially if the thing they're writing has a word count of 10 dictionaries. Seriously guys, give the writing team of
Insert favorite pop culture series here.
a break. That said, some retcons have nothing to do with the story and more to do with the mechanics themselves. In most other mediums, we call these patches. One day a fireball spell might deal 2 damage, and the next it'll deal 4 damage. Most people just ignore the fact that it's more powerful the next day, even though it's a clear retcon. If I make a character who is renowned for surviving a fireball to the face only to die from it the next day, what do? Do I just retcon my own backstory? Do I try to justify it in character saying that the original fireball weakened me, or that the chaotic nature of magic has made fireballs stronger? No, you complain to the people who make the changes until they retcon you a fireproof face. Wait, that's a bad idea. Let me retcon that. I've only ever given good advice. Yeah! Successful example of retconning right there. So now you know all about retcons. You're welcome. Stop! In the name of Larp. Guess who has 2 thumbs, always had 2 thumbs, and will always have 2 thumbs because he follows all safety precautions around sharp objects? This guy. Safety and health is one of the most important things you can have, and while Larp as a hobby involves smacking each other with fake swords, it doesn't mean it has to involve actual injuries. So get ready, because I'm going to show you how to Larp safely. For today's video, we're focusing on combat-based LARPs where blasters blast off and swords sword stuff. While I consider Model UNs to be LARPs, the most physical danger you'll get from those are paper cuts and nuclear annihilation. Being safe in LARP isn't just about not hitting people too hard, it's also about having the right protection. Accidents do happen, and you've got to protect your equipment. I'm not just talking about your expensive foam weapons, and assuming I'm talking about guys, I'm also talking about your other weapons. I'm talking about your peanuts, your longsword, the Johnson, the one-eyed snake, the hard drive, the shaft, the hot dog, your banana, the water gun, the magic wand, the lightsaber, your family jewels, lollipop, the jawbreaker, your flute, your blasting rod, the shotgun, your cock-a-doodle-doo. Yeah, that thing. You need to protect it by wearing a cup. Oh, and if you have no idea what I'm talking about, go ask your parents later. Most LARPs have a maximum force limit, not just to protect your bones, your equipment, but also the organizers in a legal manner. If I tell you to go ham on someone and that someone gets hurt, I'm liable to get sued for encouraging the violence, even if I'm not the one who swung the blade. That said, if you hurt someone after I told you to take it easy, then legally speaking, it's 100% your fault at that point. Not to say that you wouldn't be in trouble in the other scenario, but this is a more clear-cut case. Speaking of injuries and liability, a lot of LARPs get you to sign a waiver of sorts or have a sign-up that says you agree not to sue them when you enter the area to LARP. Not only does this help protect the organizers, but it also makes idiots think twice about slide tackling someone into oblivion. P.S. I'm a LARP channel, not a legal channel, so take this advice with a grain of salt. Yeah, now I'm covered too. Besides wearing a cup, there are other forms of protection that some LARPs require as a minimum. In many blaster-type games, goggles are always absolutely required. You're not even allowed on the field without them. When something can fly at you with enough force to take out an eye, no amount of good aiming will be able to prevent an accident. Accidents like being hit in the extendable staff, the joystick, the medicine balls, the space between the 2 trees below the belt, the Eiffel Tower, the bushes, the third leg, the middle finger, the straight and narrow, the worm, the beef handle, the pistol grip, the tugboat, the baby puncher, the penis! Moral of the story, wear a cup. So now you know everything about being safe in LARP. You're welcome. This episode is never going to be monetized, is it? Want a whole lot of LARP? Want a whole lot of LARP? Do you have a place to LARP? Good. Do you have what passes for a character sheep? Good. Do you have friends to play with? Yeah, we'll work on that. How about a suit of armor, swords, shields, another sword just in case, boots, more swords because you can never have enough swords, and underwear? No? Well then, you've come to the right place, so get ready because I'm going to show you how to LARP with equipment. Remember back in episode 1, season 1, when I said most LARPers prefer the term kit over costume? Well, besides trying to look more mature, there's actually a pretty good reason for it, or so we tell ourselves at night. So what is that reason? Short answer, because they're different. Long answer, because a costume is meant to be worn and look good, while kit is supposed to be used. LARPers don't just walk down a catwalk and pose for photographs, selfies, and the like. I mean, we also do that, but we also run around and fight people. If you are or know anybody who cosplays, they'll tell you that while their stuff might look good, the majority of said stuff is not practical at all. LARP kit, on the other hand, is. To a certain point, in that it doesn't have to stop actual weaponry, which on the pragmatic scale of clothing puts it somewhere between HEMA and cosplay itself. Pro tip, make sure you have a summer and winter version of your outfit. Nothing sucks more than drowning in your own sweat because you decide that you needed 2 extra bits of armor. Layering is important. Make sure you have something called a soft kit to wear underneath so that the metal doesn't chafe or pinch you as much when you move around. Now, I know I've been mentioning fighting and taking hits a lot, but not all LARP kits have to involve actual armor. In many cases, it's just cloth robes. After all, mages exist. Fictionally exist in fantasy worlds, that is, and they need to wear clothes too, so that counts as kit, which is convenient. I don't know about you, but real metal armor you can strap to yourself is expensive, and so is leather. Being a mage also means you don't have to buy expensive foam equipment either, and just resort to throwing beanbags at people as spells. That said, a mage should always carry around something to protect themselves when they run out of magic. If you're playing a mage, you probably can't afford proper metal armor, so what do then? One answer involves rentals. Some LARPs allow you to borrow their equipment, which comes with admission or sometimes as a separate rental fee. More often than not, this rental fee is waived if you play an NPC and follow their every command. So what do you do if your LARP doesn't let you borrow their equipment because they don't exist or they've run out or whatever? The easy answer is to mooch off your friend who has multiple swords because of their impulsive need to fill that empty void with material goods. Nobody has more friends than the man with more swords. In many LARPs with differing factions, you also have to think about color so that your own team doesn't accidentally attack you out of confusion. For me, I try to keep my base kit as neutral as possible, only changing the color of my scarf to show allegiances. Red team forever! Then of course you can make your own stuff, but if you did that, you wouldn't be contributing to capitalism. So now you know about kit. You're welcome! Can't buy me Larpo, Larpo, can't buy me Larpo. Money makes the world go round. Without it, parts of the globe would be plunged into perpetual darkness and the other half would suffer under the constant, unyielding heat of the sun. LARP in that regard is no different. It needs real money to run and participate in, and fictional money for things to work too sometimes. So get ready because I'm going to show you how to LARP. I'll preface this by saying that not all LARPs actually need money both in-game and out. Murder mysteries, for example, can be done on a budget using your everyday work clothes and no in-game money need exists for the purposes of the game. Some games, however, literally can't happen without money. For the most part, these involve games that have a lot of participants where a space has to be rented out. Organizers in these cases cover the costs by charging the players a fee of admission. This can be avoided somewhat by just using a public park, but like any public space, it might not be available or convenient by the time you show up, so be sure to book things in advance. Another fee involved could be health insurance. If your LARP involves a lot of contact, then it's fair to say that accidents could happen. In which case, money would need to go towards that as well. Then of course you have the administrative costs, the actual organizing of stuff and so forth. The most important of which involves hiring out porta potties. Seriously, you do not want to go to a LARP without any way to relieve yourself. Then you have trademarks, copyright, registering as a business, and all the weird stuff that comes with that. But I'm not going to get into that since different countries have different laws and the fact that this is a guide for LARPing, not running one. So let's move on to something I'm actually rich in, fictional money. For LARP money, it can come in many forms, as coin, credits, or simply treasure. Whatever the case, there's always a way to get it, through a quest, through a trade, or outright stealing and looting. As in stealing through in-game mechanics, not actual stealing, that would be rude. So now you've got your hand on some gold, what next? What do you do with it all? If you said anything along the lines of buying some new equipment, I'll have to stop you right there. Most LARPs don't have $100 equipment up for grabs in exchange for fake in-game money. Unless the entrance fee is super high and covers it, this will always never be the case. At best, you'll get dollar store items like bracelets, jewelry, or in-game enchantments and potions. You can also use this money to pay other players to work for you, or sometimes buy property and in-game land to give you other benefits like more money. Due to the nature of LARP, this does pose an interesting question. Roleplay-wise, if I have 1,000,000 gold coins, there's nothing stopping me from actually buying a new sword in character. However, if I don't have the money in real life, I can't really do that unless someone is okay with giving up their expensive foam sword for said fake in-game money. Keep in mind, the reverse can also be true. I can buy out-of-game stuff with all my money and sell it in-game. In effect, turning the experience into a pay-to-win situation by using fake money to buy enchantments, potions, and mercenaries. Now, a good organizer won't look too kindly on this sort of behavior and will stamp down on people's attempt at pulling such shenanigans if it starts getting out of hand. Like many things in LARP, it can be twisted, taken advantage of, and corrupted. Just remember, LARP is a shared hobby, a group experience, and only can stay as such if everyone treats it that way. So now I've given you the currency of your mind, knowledge. You're welcome. We found LARP in a hopeless place. If you're watching this video, then it means you want to know how to LARP. To anyone who hasn't dipped their toe in the hobby, LARP can be a scary, intimidating thing. With written rules, unwritten rules, spoken but unwritten rules, and unspoken rules that'll blow your mind if anyone says one of the syllables out loud. Well, try not to be alarmed, but there's more than one way to LARP at the same LARP. So get ready, because I'm going to show you how to do all the LARP. Every community you find can be made up of smaller sub-communities. Generally, you can divide them up into the ruling class, the peasant class, etc. But that would be elitist, and we're not about that at all because being elitist is bad, and I'm good, therefore I cannot be elitist unlike you. Bringing it back to sub-communities, most LARPers generally fall into one of two different categories. You have the role-players who really get into character and want to explore the world, tell a story, and generally just immerse themselves into the fantasy of LARP. Then you have the fighters who treat this more as a sport. They play to win and train to get better. If they're not tearing it up on the battlefield, they're not having fun. Now, despite how I phrase this, they aren't mutually exclusive clubs. You can join both if you want. Then you have the sub-communities found inside the fighters and role players. You've got the socializers who turn up to mingle with their real and roleplay friends. Then you have the show-offs who know HEMA and have real sword fighting skills. Half the time they get their ass kicked as they deal real-life death blows that only deal 1 damage in-game, and the other half completely destroying all opposition without breaking a sweat. Then you have the other more literal show-offs who make their own stuff because they're into stitching, smithing, and cosplay. Which reminds me, a large portion of the community love to make their own stuff and sometimes come together before actual LARP events to discuss or make said stuff. Now that I think about it, since all that crafting takes place outside the game, what they're doing by definition is literal metagaming. Speaking of metagamers, there are those who ignore or at least place character motivations low on the totem pole of priority when they play. This is a game and they get it treated as such. Fight, loot, and level up. That's not to say that this is a bad way to view LARP, though this group does often butt heads with those who want to roleplay more. In my view, as long as they're not hurting anyone, I don't really care how they play the game. And that's what I like about. Besides them, you've also got the newbies, ready to be turned into any of the other categories or players above. You don't need to be good at anything to be a LARPer. As long as you're having fun that's not at the expense of others, then you're a swell LARPer in my book. Except for gatekeepers, screw those guys. Elitist snobs who consider anyone who doesn't play, dress, or roleplay to their standards as inferior. Now remember, you're not a real fan of mine unless you subscribe and hit that like button. So now you know about the different kinds of LARPers. You're welcome! My baby LARP, my baby LARP, I need you, oh how I need you. If you're new to LARP or haven't LARPed at all, then this specific episode isn't for you. This episode is for veterans of the foam sword battlefields. This episode teaches people who are already in LARP how to get you newbies into our hobbies. So if you're new to this, get out of here. Scat, go. Gatekeeping powers activate. Pro tip to veterans, that is one thing you don't want to do. So how do we, as veterans of LARP, get new people into the hobby? How do we teach them how to LARP? Well, step 1, show them season 1 of I'm gonna show you how to LARP. That's all you have to do. So now you know how to get new people into LARP. You're welcome. Jokes aside, everybody has been new at least once before, and I'll show you how to be the best LARP teacher ever. So get ready, because I'm gonna show you how to show others how to get into LARP. LARP is a hobby, and like all hobbies, it's not for everyone, so don't try to force your hobby onto people who have shown no interest in it, and no, Bob, I don't want to see your icky worm collection! But if it makes you happy, then I'm happy that you have a worm collection, even if I don't want anything to do with it. Sorry for yelling at you, Bob. Generally speaking, if someone is interested in LARP, they'll be interested in LARP. That said, sometimes they won't outright say it, so you have to infer based on their past activities. Cosplayers like to dress up, so that's one sign. People who play D&D of course enjoy role-playing, so that's another sign. And of course people who watch my videos are also the type who likely will want to get into LARP given the chance. Honestly, as long as you yourself are passionate about LARP, then you might already have a friend ask about your hobby if you've mentioned it before. The hints are subtle, but they're there. They might ask you how your LARP event went. They might ask you if you had fun. They might even ask you how one joins the game. Such subtle hints. So after identifying your potential LARP recruit, what's your next step? Should you get them a weapon, some armor, sit them down to create a long backstory that'll fit in the rest of the world in which your own LARP character already inhabits? Well, you can do all that, or you can just go to LARP. The biggest thing about LARP to remember is that it's a group activity, a community, and a good community is there to help. Sure, you can outfit your friend on your own, and that's fine and all, but having a small army help you do it is even better and will make your newbie friend feel even more included. Trust me, before you know it, the rogue will have lent the guy his sword, the knight will let him borrow his spare shield, and the lawkeeper will have asked a bunch of probing questions about their new original character. And hey, if they don't have a character idea, that's fine. Just get them to play a summoned character, an NPC, or something that doesn't require so much thinking to roleplay. Point is, it takes a village to raise a newbie. In other words, peer pressure. Trap them in your LARP using the trap of social convention. They might be able to say no to you, but they can't say no to everyone. So now you know how to get others to LARP. You're welcome! That's how strong my LARP is. Whoa. This episode is less of a guide on how to LARP and more of a rant, a narcissistic TED talk in which I get to flex my brain and show how smart I am. A lot of what I'm about to talk about crosses into game design, so if you're into that sort of thing, then get ready. No, I'm not running out of ideas for LARP guides, I'm just branching out to include a more varied audience to boost interest in the hobby. Yeah, that's what I'm doing, honest. So get ready, I'm going to show you how to LARP. Kinda, not really, close enough. No matter how much focus you put into role-playing at LARP, the underlying mechanics and numbers will always still matter on some level. Having a metal helmet gives you an extra 2 hit points, sword strikes deal 1 damage, and the fireball requires the caster to chant it before throwing a sanctioned beanbag, etc. Generally speaking, if a LARP has a spell that does damage, then it means they have abilities that are limited in some way, and the only way to increase this limit is by leveling up. It's weird to me that RPGs and leveling up are so ingrained with each other despite the specific phrasing of role-playing having nothing to do with numbers getting bigger. Regardless, the feeling of getting stronger without actually having to do constant exercise and eating right is so seductive that some players simply choose to stick around their LARP for that feeling of power, even if everything else becomes stagnant. This leads to an interesting problem with no clear answer. What do you do when you have a group of players get too powerful? In an ideal world, the more powerful players are spread out, but all too easily a good number of them will be in a single faction. If they get tired of being overpowered, they might just decide to retire their characters, but we can't trust people to always do such a thing. We can always make leveling up only give small amounts of power and make it grow slow, however that in of itself might make people feel like they're putting too much time and effort into something with little payoff. If you give too much power too quickly, they might find themselves soon hitting a ceiling and stalling with nowhere else to grow. At that point, what do? If the answer is to add more levels and more skills and abilities, then stop. Just stop. It's a terrible idea in LARP. If this was a video game, that'd be fine, but in a LARP where you have to memorize how much damage each spell does to you in the event that you might get hit with it, adding more numbers and effects to remember only makes it more difficult for newbies to play. Nothing kills immersion quicker than calling time out to figure if lightning bolt stuns or dazes the target, and then trying to figure out if there's a difference between being dazed or stunned. If one were to add more abilities, I recommend that they only affect the person who uses them, so if you want to memorize more stuff, you don't force new people to do it. Point is, the bigger the rule set, the harder it is to learn. The harder it is to learn, the less new people you'll have. The less new people you have, the less people you'll have in the future. The less people you have in the future, the smaller the LARP. The smaller the LARP, the bigger chance it might dissolve. I'm not telling you to not put in more mechanics, I'm just saying you should think very, very hard before introducing them. So you now know everything about feature creep as it pertains to LARP. You're welcome. LARP Shack! Baby LARP Shack! Yeah, okay, we're doing this now. What's better than having several hours of LARPing? A whole day, 2 days, a weekend, a whole week, or even month. If something is good, then having more is better, just like cake. But to live this dream, you have to do the unthinkable. You have to go camping. So get ready, because I'm going to show you how to camp at LARP. The biggest difference between camping on its own versus camping at LARP is the number of people you camp with. Now don't get me wrong, you can totally camp with a group, but that's more of an option, whereas LARP it's a requirement. Besides that, you don't really do the classic camp-based activities. For example, you don't have to go fishing, you don't live off the land, and you certainly don't have to learn any survival skills. Most LARP camping trips take place not in the absolute wilderness, but rather pre-set up camping areas, often with modern day amenities like shelter, toilets, and sometimes Wi-Fi. Anyways, let's focus on the first two aspects I mentioned. When I say shelter, I mean things like full-on cabins with carpets and air conditioning, making the whole experience less like camping and more like a sleepover next to nature. On the other end of the scale, shelter can be something as simple as a gazebo over a couple benches and the like. Not enough to live under, but enough to make a meal with your friends. In these cases, you'll need to bring your own tents, which I'll get into later. Then we have toilets. These might be the fully stocked facilities of the cabin, or they can slide down to something like a porta potty all the way further down into a literal hole in the ground, which is less than ideal. Trust me, when you're wearing a full suit of armor, you want an enclosed toilet with a door covering you as you do your business. Now don't get me wrong, the openness of the wilderness is great for when you need to stretch and disassemble your kit, but exposing yourself to your fellow LARPers is not how you make friends. Some LARPs are okay with you bringing whatever tent or shelter you want. Others ask for setting accurate stuff. Some places actually give you a choice and set up two zones for these two different tents. The first zone is an out-of-character area where you can retreat to have a break without danger of being attacked in character. The second zone is what I'd like to call the danger zone. If you set up here, then make sure you're not stripped down to your underwear, because an attack could happen at any time. Only the most crazy, hardcore roleplayers will be prepared to literally roleplay in their sleep, and I, for one, aren't even that crazy. That said, a lot of LARPs for safety reasons usually have a cutoff time for combat, even in these danger zones. Fighting during the day is completely different to fighting at night with no light around, which of course could hypothetically lead to you charging into a group of enemies who turn out to be a bunch of tents that would then wrap around the poor knight, who then tumbles down the hill and knocks out the wizard who's about to head to bed. Hypothetically, of course. Wait, the video's about to end? Stop! Wait, let me just finish by saying bring lots of food, water, and sunscreen, because only idiots think they can take on the sun and wind. And, what else? Well, I can't really think of it, so I guess it doesn't matter too much. So now you know how to camp at LARP. Oh god, bugs! You need bug repellent! How deep is your LARP? Your LARP, how deep is your LARP? For most of my videos, I have a theme or topic I stick to. Before I make a video, I brainstorm what I want to talk about and do a bunch of research to make sure that you, the viewer, get as much information jammed into your brain as humanly possible. And then I find an appropriate love song to sing through the disclaimer. Sometimes, though, the amount of research is too small to make a proper video out of, so today I've compiled a list of miscellaneous tips and tricks for an aspiring LARPer. Tips that'll help make the most of your time before, during, and after the event. So get ready, because I'm going to show you how to LARP. First thing about winning LARP is knowing that you can lose. I don't mean that you have to remember that losing is a possibility, I mean that it's okay to lose, that sometimes losing is fun, that playing a character with flaws who gets tricked or beaten is one way you can be a winner. While LARPing and sports both share a few elements, they are in the end both very, very different beasts. Another tip for LARPers is if someone asks you, "Are you sure?" you should probably take a moment to think about what you're doing before you're about to do it. Also, if you need to stall for time, be sure to ask, "Are you sure?" and that should buy you a bit of time before they go back to doing what they're about to do, likely murdering you if you needed to stall for time. Befriend your enemies. I'm not talking about having a righteous paladin marry the evil warlock. I'm saying you should talk to each other out of character. Maybe discuss future plot elements you both can do. Have a shared backstory maybe, so that you can both go onto the field of LARP and have something to play off. You don't have to predetermine who wins each fight, but you can certainly collude with each other to make the inciting incident occur. Trust me when I say having a history with another character can make a real difference, it can make a real difference. Also, give people the benefit of the doubt and communicate. If you think someone is cheating, try to talk them out of character. It's entirely possible that you're the one making the mistake, or that they're not intentionally cheating. I know, there's some real scumbags out there, but let's try not to go to that conclusion straight away. Using the excuse, "It's what my character would do," is just that, an excuse. Asking for permission is better than asking for forgiveness, because at the end of the day, nobody can be forced to play. If things get really bad, there's nothing stopping people from just leaving out of character. Summoning rituals have a high chance of failure, but don't let that dissuade you from doing them anyways. They make convenient plot points. And my last LARPing tip, and this is a big one, make everyone feel included. I've mentioned or at least alluded to this tip before, but it really is that important. Most of us LARPers, due to our interests, have probably experienced being left out on some level. I'm not telling you to sacrifice your happiness for someone else, only that you shouldn't dismiss them before they really LARP. We all have to start somewhere, so let's try to start off on the right foot, okay? So now you know how to LARP. You're welcome. Just a bigger hunk of larp. The final boss fight is such a widespread staple in the media that no matter where you look, it's there. You have the big giant eye thing in Lord of the Rings, Bowser in almost any Mario game, and literally Hitler in anything World War II related. LARP in that regard is no different. Today, on this final episode, I'm going to tell you all about the big bad monster, the final, end-all, be-all of conflicts. So get ready, because I'm going to show you how to do your final LARP like a boss. So when I talk about boss fights, I mean a fight that takes place at the end of a story arc or the last game of the year where everyone goes off and does holiday Christmassy stuff before returning the next year filled with candy canes and sugar-based regrets. Very rarely does this boss fight indicate the final game ever. A LARP isn't just going to end because of one of these fights, but if a LARP knows in advance that it's going to have a last game, then this is usually the kind of spectacle they'll include to make it memorable. Note that I'm ignoring player characters who are very powerful, skilled, or in some cases literal bosses of evil factions. What I'm referring to here when I talk about bosses is boss fights in the more gamey way. This can be a single giant boss with lots of hit points or even an army usually led by that single giant boss. Mechanically speaking, a boss fight can serve as a finale as I've mentioned to ensure all the power and resources you've gained is justified and put to use. Now there are three important factors when making a boss fight. The first is the story. Some LARPs don't care about this and the community in these sorts of LARPs are just happy to wail on stuff with foam weaponry. But for the LARPs that do care, usually this boss is behind a bunch of earlier problems or perhaps was summoned / created by the overarching baddie. Regardless, a lot of people find it hard to care about a fight if there's no context behind it. Long story short, it's easier for some people to beat something off if they have a story for it. The second factor is costuming. Now I know, I shouldn't be using the word costuming after I've gone to such lengths to call what we do as kit. But the word kitting sounds kinda weird to me. I'm going to be talking about kitting, kiting, knitting, bleh. Just doesn't work for me. Anyways, a boss monster has to be identifiable as the boss. Even if they're not that scary, they have to be at least look more intimidating than their non-boss like counterparts. Even if they're the most powerful thing in the universe, nobody's gonna take them seriously if they rock up to the battle in their PJs. There is, however, one big issue with this piece of advice. An issue that the most wise, mature, and adult of us will ever know and experience. An issue that will age anyone who hears it. The cost. Buying a metal suit of armor is expensive, but we tell ourselves it's okay because we'll wear it all the time at LARP, making it worth it. A boss fight, however, means it'll only see action once unless you keep resurrecting them or if they're not the type to actually fight until the finale. Or you can just be rich and keep buying new boss outfits whenever you need it, whatever. Relatedly, you have to think about how practical the boss costume is. Now this advice kind of applies to everyone, but more so to bosses. Big scary costumes can be hard around to move in, so you have to keep things relatively light. No matter how awesome and quick you are, anyone in what amounts to a fancy looking straitjacket doesn't really inspire fear. Now that we have the context and the fearsome appearance out of the way, what do we need now? What's the third thing we need to make a boss fight a boss fight? The answer is we need the actual mechanics. The louder actions to their words, the dance to their talk, the deeds to their creeds. Technically this should be divided into two different sections, but it still comes down to how good the boss is at fighting people. We're talking about who gets to be the boss monster. Ideally, you'll want someone who is actually a skilled fighter. Someone who, when fighting another person of equal or higher mechanical level, can still come out on top through sheer personal speed and skill. Because if you make someone who is physically slow and can't fight, it turns from a boss fight into a particularly tough pinata to beat up for treats. Only instead of candy, it's level ups and maybe magical loot. Mechanically speaking, you can also give them lots of abilities. Just try not to do anything too new with abilities. Sure, you can give them a brand new awesome venom beam laser breath, but if the fight has to stop so you can explain what it does, then you're just pausing the action to boast how awesome you're hunt, pushed around, or instant death type abilities. Generally, you want them to last a while, which is why they get lots of HP as well. However, you have to be very careful with this. The worst thing you can do is give the boss monster too many hit points. It'll just tire everyone out, including the boss itself. To make things more interesting, sometimes the boss can be a boss fight and more normally, but maybe have some sort of quest / puzzle related item that would deal a bunch of damage or even negate an immunity or disable a devastating ability they have. Like say, finding and throwing enchanted pepper at the dragon to make it cough and remove its devastating breath attack. Point is, fighting a boss has to be tough and challenging, and bringing it down has to feel cathartic or at least worth it. Now all of this advice is useless if no one's having fun. As long as the players and community are into it, then that's all that counts. Speaking of the community, the biggest boss fight any community has to face is toxicity. So let's band together and fight this thing. Make sure everyone's included, respect people's limits, encourage their stories, look after yourself, your health, mental state, and wallet. Compliment everyone's kit and share your candy. So now you know how to be a real boss in LARP. You're welcome. And thank you for sharing this journey with me. Remember, the real boss is you. You'll be the prince and I'll be the princess. It's a LARP story, baby, just say yes. Welcome to the first episode of Season 3, everyone! Allow me to start this by asking a simple question. Want to do a single game of LARP? No? Too short? What about 2 or 3? Still too short? How about a whole bunch of games and we can call it a campaign? Sounds good? Good then, because I'm going to show you how to LARP a whole campaign with a story! As I mentioned in one of my previous videos, it's easier for people to beat off other people if they've got a good story to go along with it. Nobody wants to beat off a room full of men without context. Unless you're into gel blasters, sports, or video games, I guess. I don't judge. Point is, we all need a reason to do stuff. We want it, we crave it, we need it. Why am I storming a keep? Why am I fighting a dragon? Why do we exist in a world where death is inevitable, where the promise of an afterlife is uncertain? Too existential? Let's pull it back a bit. For the more pragmatic LARPer who only wants to win and doesn't care about the story, you should still pay attention since they can give you a boost in power. One scenario might involve players gathering some sort of holy artifact to defeat an evil overlord that gives you a buff when holding said artifacts. Generally speaking, when making a campaign, there's continuity involved. Whether it's power-giving loot, a reoccurring enemy, or some sort of other mechanic or area that can be destroyed and or developed based on player actions. For balance reasons, sometimes these buffs are limited to specific days or scenarios, but if they're permanent, there's usually a way for other players to wrest control away from the original holders. The main issue of continuity is what happens when certain key players don't attend an event because they caught the flu or something. If a player who just runs around hitting things doesn't turn up, it's not too much of an issue. But if a character who got the legendary amulet last time that's needed to defeat the big bad evil guy doesn't turn up, then we're in a bit of a pickle. But not really. When something like this happens, we can do one of 3 things. The first is to ignore the fact that they're missing and create a stand-in. Maybe give someone else a magic amulet that looks slightly different, but say it's the same one in universe and continue with the game. Your second option is to ignore it even harder and put everyone through a side quest until the original amulet guy shows up. And the third thing is kind of my favorite from a thematic sense, but problematic in its own way. And that is to let the bad guy win. Now, unless the bad guy's plan is to literally kill everyone and stop them from respawning forever, the story can continue. Remember, a story doesn't have to be victory after victory after victory. It can also have its downs, terrible lows, and defeats. Note, this only works if the missing player would be okay with this, and if the other people are nice and not the sort to get mad at the absent player out of character. And I just realized I've only covered PvE type stuff. Quickly speaking, to have a PvP type campaign, instead of having an overarching villain, just have an overarching reward, whether it be loot, land, or prestige, to name a few. Said campaigns don't have to be initiated by the organizers, but instead by the players themselves, and of course there's nothing stopping multiple campaigns happening in the same game at the same time. That about covers it, I hope. So now you know how to do story stuff and campaigns in LARP. You're welcome. Want a clue for the next topic of the next episode? Well, let's just say it involves people who scream a lot. Savage LARP. Did somebody break your heart? Looking like an angel, but you're savage LARP. I got banned from my LARP for having weapons that didn't pass the safety test. Weapons like these guns. So strong. So get ready, brother, because I'm gonna show you how to LARP with these pythons. You know what's great? Having a hobby that doesn't need you to be fit and strong to succeed in. A hobby like video games, board games, or even a LARP where you can just buy victory by wearing lots of armor to increase your toughness. Though that strategy might not work if other, more tougher, fitter, more handsome people also buy a ton of armor. In all seriousness though, you don't have to be fit or even run around that much to win at LARP. You just have to have fun by role-playing, tell a story, or sneak around waiting for the perfect time to strike those stupid, handsome... But if you're a barbarian, then your job is to scream and smash everything in sight. The louder you are, the more intimidation points you get. That's right, we're talking about savage muscle men, or women, Amazons, or protein knights if you prefer. Whatever your pronoun, you're not here to think or talk, you're here to hit stuff hard. Within the safety limits of your LARP, of course. The barbarian is what you want to play if you don't want to do any of that pesky roleplay stuff, and don't want to spend too much money on expensive metal armor. I mean, that foam axe you got was expensive enough, and you don't need to mortgage out your house again. Wait, what do you mean savage, unarmored people can still roleplay? Alright, I'll acknowledge it. You can be a noble, primal, and shamanistic roleplay kind of person. You can be superstitious, even by the standards of someone who lives in a world filled with literal magic. I mean, you can even play without armor to boast how skillful you are in combat, giving yourself a purposeful handicap for a larger challenge. Or it's an excuse for when you lose against someone with more hit points. Either way. Now, the odd thing with barbarians is that in many systems you don't get many, if any, bonuses for being a non-armored martial type. So this means you either turn into cannon fodder for the plate mail wearing master race, or you turn into the real version of Neo, basically dodging everyone's swords and axes and arrows in slow motion. So now you know how to be an unarmored tough guy in LARP. You're welcome. Next week we're gonna keep talking about getting muscles, but in a different way. Can you guess the topic? So strong. You are the face of a powerful LARP. So that's my opinion.
Hey, you know what would be cool? A gym where you get to dress up and run around to get fit and pretend to be a wizard, and then you...
Stop. That's a LARP. You're just describing a LARP. So get ready, because I'm going to show you how to LARP healthily. Last week we talked about muscly barbarians, so this week we're discussing how to become muscly barbarians, or muscly knights, rogues, wizards, or whatever. Now, I know there are many ways to LARP that don't involve you being physically active, or at least active enough to have sore muscles by the end of the game, but for those of you who run around swinging foam swords for hours on end while wearing metal armor in the blazing heat, this episode is for you. The first thing you should remember is to stretch. Getting a cramp sucks, and stretching can help with that. Don't forget to hydrate either, but don't go too crazy. Some side effects of having too much water include throwing up if you run too much, having to pee while wearing a full set of metal armor, and, well, those are the main ones, I guess. Now, most LARPs are a weekly thing with sessions lasting hours. While this can help keep you active, this won't necessarily make you fit. Exercise is good, but it needs to be done at least several times a week, not just once per week. So if you're relying on LARP specifically to build muscle or increase your endurance, you're going to be in it for a long time. Now that said, if you're doing nothing else physical for the rest of the week, this is still a good way to get out and move around. So don't take what I say as condemnation of LARP as a form of exercise, but rather that it's a good, healthy addition to an active lifestyle. If your LARP literally has daily or nightly sessions where you run around, then that's a whole different story, making it at least a great way to work on your cardio. Now, unlike the gym, LARPs might have you wear heavy, sometimes restrictive exercise clothes that we personally call armor. The average suit of armor can weigh anywhere between 20 to 60 kilos, or for all you non-metric peasants, roughly 44 to 120 pounds. Despite all this weight, it's not as heavy as you might think it is. If you have one shopping bag filled to the brim, that might be a tough haul. But if you have two shopping bags with half the groceries between them, then that's going to be a much easier trip to the car. So think of wearing armor like having a bunch of shopping bags strapped all over your body. It's not an issue of lifting at this point, but of lasting. Your endurance does take a bit of a hit, but if you minimize your movements and rest when you need to, you'll get through the LARP without much collapsing. Physical activity can be difficult, but if you stick with it, you'll find it getting easier and easier every time. And hey, if you really want to metagame and be super optimized, just work out outside of LARP. Go run to increase your speed, lift weights so your arms don't get so tired when you swing your sword, eat healthy food, and hydrate often to increase your overall health to outlast your enemies. Then invite your LARP group over to the gym to get 3 months of membership, work out together to keep each other motivated, continue to eat right, rest well, get buff, and don't skip leg day and dominate the battlefield. So now you know about fitness in LARP. You're welcome. Next week we're going to keep talking about getting strong, but in a different way. Can you guess the topic? We're no strangers to LARP. You know the rules, and so do I. So you know how we just had the static word-based disclaimer that I just sung over? Well, consider this a second verbal disclaimer specific to this specific episode. Now that I exploited the social construct of a disclaimer to avoid liability, get ready because I'm going to tell you all about the exploits and power gaming that you can do in LARP. Starting at a very basic level of power gaming that's so basic that it's barely even considered power gaming, we have armor. In most video games and tabletop games, armor reduces the amount of damage you take, but calculating that sort of thing in real time with human brains is near impossible for the average smooth brain larper, so instead, we universally just say, armor adds hit points. So as I've mentioned in previous videos before, Larp therefore is a pay-to-win game. The more money you pay, the more HP you have. The more HP you have, the bigger advantage you have over those who don't. Next up, pretending that you're more powerful than you actually are is a great way of stalling for time. Nobody wants to be hit with an instant death spell, for example, so as long as you don't actually go through with casting it, nobody can accuse you of using a spell you don't actually have. And hey, if they doubt and argue with you, then they're spending that time arguing instead of killing you anyways, which is a win-win if you're trying to stall for time. Some spells require you to chant out some words before casting them, like, "By the mystical arcane winds, I cast Fireball!" That's 5 words plus the words, "I cast Fireball." Now all that chanting gives your opponent time to either dodge, run away, or kill you before you can finish casting the spell. However, if you exploit the system and say things like, "Wait, I cast Fireball," that's me just saying the word wait 5 times, which is part of the chant, plus saying I cast Fireball. Rules as written, it technically counts. Usually when LARPs talk about two-handed weapons, they have a rule forbidding you from wielding a second weapon or a shield in your offhand. However, sometimes they don't specify the fact that you need to use both hands on said weapon. Wielding a greatsword in one hand while standing sideways decreases your frontal hit profile, increases your reach slightly, and frees up your other hand to use potions, items, or insulting gestures. Real swords in real life this size are heavy, but foam swords not so much. Another exploit is to pretend to die. Now, for the most part, people will stop attacking you when there's no point in attacking you, especially if there are other more pressing matters to attend to. And once they stop paying attention to you, you can always sneak attack them. The final exploit is that most LARPs that are safety conscious don't allow you to hit people's heads. So in these cases, crouch down or even kneel. Better yet, use a shield to cover the rest of your body until only your head is showing, forcing your enemies to hit you in the noggin and potentially get penalized for it. Oh, and just in case you forgot, please rewatch the disclaimer at the start, including the verbal disclaimer. So now you know about exploits in power gaming and LARP. You're welcome. Next week we're talking about the power of music. Can you guess the topic? Exploits and power gaming isn't always a good thing unless your specific community embraces it. Not only that, but exploits by their very nature are also specific to each LARP and rule set. The advice I'm about to show you is less advice and more warnings and observations. In fact, some of these tricks might get you banned, reprimanded, and even hurt the community with toxicity, so use them at your own risk. Actually, no, don't even try it. I am telling you in black and white language to not use exploits and power gaming at your LARP. This episode isn't a guide to LARP anymore, this is a warning. There are unwritten rules that forbid these kinds of shenanigans. Take my hand, take my whole life too, for I can't help falling in LARP with you. Martial prowess, magical talent, and sheer cunning are all traits you'll want to see in an average adventurer. But sometimes it's not enough. Sometimes their spirits flag. Sometimes their motivations become unmotivated. Sometimes their enthusiasm needs a boost. Sometimes we need background music. This is where the power ballad begins. This is when the bard power slides onto the stage. Either that or create a... wait for it. A distraction. Get them! Kill them all! This is where I'm going to show you how to be a bard in LARP. Historically speaking, bards or instrument players have always had a place on the battlefield, sometimes to provide a beat to march to, sometimes to give orders over the din of battle, and sometimes just to style all over the opposition. Scientifically speaking, you're at least 20% more effective in battle when listening to rock music. The obvious downside, however, is if you can hear the music, so can they, and they'll get 20% stronger as well. Now, most bards have 2 different roles in LARP. The first is to entertain the masses, helping to immerse people into the atmosphere of the fantasy. This style of bard is there to flex their musical muscles, to roleplay and enchant everyone with their magical notes. Sometimes literally with magic. Well, fictionally literally, since literal magic doesn't exist. The second kind of bard is the sort that aren't very good at playing music. These guys we call, wait for it, a distraction. Get them! Kill them all! While I have seen it done safely, I still believe bringing a musical instrument onto the LARP battlefield is a terrible idea. For one, most instruments aren't designed to take a hit or dish them out, and the instruments that can take a hit are a bit unwieldy or potentially damaging to foam weaponry. Now don't get me wrong, if you can aim away from someone's face in a LARP, then you can aim away from an instrument as well, but accidents do happen. If you must be a bard, I recommend you either be the singing poem type, or if you have an instrument, to use them in a non-battle area. But here's the thing, as a bard you don't have to sing alone. A bunch of knights is called an order, a group of rogues is called a gang, a group of wizards is called a bad idea, and a group of bards is called a band. So band together to make the best music, or, wait for it, a distraction. Get them! Ah! Kill them all! So now you know how to be a bard at LARP. You're welcome. Next week we have a real killer subject. Can you guess the topic? Wait for it. A distraction. Get them! Ah! Kill them all! Let's kill this LARP. Yeah. Professional killers of the fantasy worlds, these guys will kill kids while not being personal about it by saying, "Hey kid, nothing personal," and then shanking them. So get ready because I'm going to show you how to get the edge in LARP. So to spell assassin right every time, you just have to say ass in. Oh hey, I didn't see you there until it was too late, just like a proper assassin. Now I've already touched upon them in the rogue video back in season 1, so I'll not repeat myself too much here, but to reiterate, a rogue, if you boil them down, is basically a sneaky character. An assassin, once again if you boil them down, is basically a sneaky character who kills people for money. If there wasn't any money involved, they'd be a serial killer. If they weren't being sneaky about it, they'd be normal mercenaries. And if they didn't kill people at all and just did it for the money, they'd be a thief. Frankly speaking, they're cut from a different cloth. Speaking of cloth, assassins are one of the few rogue types who leave a paper trail of their crimes behind in the form of contracts. Which is kind of odd if you think about it. Seriously, murder is against the law, right? So if you break an assassin contract as either the assassin or the hirer, what kind of lawyer is going to take up that case? Are assassins even legal in your setting? Now that I think about it, the people who'd make use of assassins are usually royalty, the sort who'd make the laws in the first place. So maybe assassins are legal in your universe. Morals and legality aside, there are a bunch of different flavors of assassins you might be able to choose in your LARP. The first, as I mentioned, are the stabby sorts who usually ambush their more armored prey or attack the mage before they are ready to cast. More often than not in a team-based setting, they're the ones duel to the boss monster while everyone else keeps their attention and then runs away once said boss monster glances in their general direction. Then you have poisons. Generally speaking, poison is just another ability in combat-based LARPs that's applied to drinks and stickers. Sure, people can just ignore the poisons if no one else is looking, but like everything else in LARP, it's all honor-based anyways, which means it can only work if people play along as they should. Otherwise, it was nothing personal, kid. No clues for next week because I'm a secretive assassin. Ba-da-ba-ba-ba, I'm LARPing it. Hot take. Food happens when you run out. You should at least keep something in reserve as a melee weapon once your range options have been spent. So get ready because I'm going to show you how to LARP with food. I believe regardless of age is one such constant. Another, food is kind of impractical. If you don't see athletes shoving pizzas down their throats while doing a 100-meter dash, you probably won't see a night sort of activity usually happens off the field, before or after each LARPing session. Sure, if there's a potion, LARPs dissuade people from doing this on the account of the potential of being attacked. Surprised and choking on the beverage halfway okay with people just pretending to eat and drink stuff. Speaking of roleplay-oriented LARPs, sometimes going to a restaurant is the whole point of the game. In parallel LARPs, it's common for players to actually eat and drink, rocking up to the restaurant in their kit. Usually people are explicitly told that this is a diplomatic situation, so no violence sometimes. It's just hand-waved. Guys, no fighting, even if you're sworn enemies. Which turns it temporarily into a parallel LARP now that I think about it. As for food for outdoor LARPs in the wilderness, just look up camping food. It's more or less the same stuff unless you really want to be in character, I guess. In which case, roasting a hog can be a great group exercise. Double check your camping permits if you're allowed to do that though. Trust me when I say police arrests are one of the worst ways to end a LARP, only coming behind a literal murder or a meteor dropping down and killing everyone instantly. If you bring candy, and I can't believe I have to say this, make sure to pick up after yourself. A candy wrapper is small and light, so just like drama, take that rubbish off the field. Side tangent to people who like to make their own clothes and armor. Make sure to only test your stuff when you've eaten a meal. Just because you can fit into your suit of armor when you're starving doesn't mean you'll be able to do it when you're stuffed. Remember, it's easier to tighten a belt than it is to add a whole extra hole to it after all. So now you know how to do food at LARP. You're welcome. Next week we're talking about a buffet of topics. Can you guess what we'll be talking about in particular? Everybody in LARP, go put your hands up. Do you like miscellaneous tips and tricks? Do you want a part 2 of the first time I did that? Maybe? Yes? No? Well, either way, this is a dictatorship, so I get to decide what media you consume. It's about time I cobble together everything that can't make a full episode together again, so get ready because I'm going to show you how to LARP. Let's start at the beginning, something I should have addressed in episode 1. Character names. Coming up with names is hard, so try making it a pun, or spell another name or thing backwards, replacing a few letters to make it flow well. For example, if you have a character who likes to wander around, it could be Wanderer spelt backwards into Reridnor. Another example is a character who protects, and it could be a pun on warranty because he's got you covered, or Warren Teary. Either that or you can make a common no-nonsense name that doesn't require a diploma to pronounce, like Bob. In just about every combat-based LARP, getting hit is fairly normal, and because of that, so are hit points. If you're having trouble keeping track of your hit points upon being hit when counting down to 0, then try counting up instead. Human brains are dumb like that and usually find it easier to do addition rather than subtraction. Everyone's different, and while this method might not work for you, I now have at least made you aware of another option. Certain skills and abilities sometimes have a time limit or time requirement to use. Sure, you can literally count the seconds, but I prefer to sing! For example, one of the abilities in a LARP I attended required you to spend 10 seconds bandaging someone to heal them. So for that, I'd sing, "Bandage, bandage, bandage, I'm bandaging you up. Please do not bleed out and die upon the floor. Bandage complete." Check the time. 10 seconds? Oh yeah, I still got it. If you wear a helmet, be sure to take deep breaths. When you have something enclosing your head, the CO2 you breathe out can build up a bit. However, if you take a deep breath out, it can help flush it out through the gaps to give you a bit more breathing room. Coincidentally, the tiny holes in the front of your helmet is also called breaths. When wielding a sword, one of the most natural things you'll want to do with it is to stab it into the ground like a lot of people in movies do. This is a terrible idea. It'll damage the foam around your expensive foam sword. If you still want to do something like that, then try holding it by the blade and resting the handle down first. Speaking of swords, ensure they're LARP safe for the LARP you attend. Different LARPs have different safety standards when it comes to weaponry. Make sure you get pre-approved shopping lists before you drop hundreds of dollars on a warhammer you're not even allowed to bring onto the field of battle. One sword might be okay at one LARP, but not okay at another. Always check, never assume. Here's one last piece of painful yet important advice. Nobody cares about your backstory. Okay, let me rephrase that. Nobody cares for the self-made audiobook that you call a backstory. Having a backstory is great and sharing can be an important part of the storytelling process, but if it slows down the game, then you're just monologuing. Remember, this isn't story time, it's LARPing time. So now you know how to LARP. You're welcome. Next week we're talking about leaders again, but in a different way. Can you guess the topic? LARP is the law, so take me deep inside. Remember that one episode where I talked about being a leader in charge of stuff? Well, besides running a guild, army, gang, or whatever you want to call your group, there's a meta sort of leader hiding behind the fourth wall. They're the owners of the LARP, the organizers, the game masters, and the script writers, so get ready because I'm going to show you how to LARP behind the scenes, or in front of them, depending on the metaphor. There are many ways to run a LARP. In a game where there's mostly violence, the people who made the LARP can be fairly hands-off, only occasionally interjecting when rules require clarification or if someone is putting too much action into the action part of live-action roleplay. In these cases, the actual story and plot aren't touched much by the organizers. These sorts of LARPs are closer to sports, with the organizers acting as referees and the like. It's a bit impersonal, but it's clean and simple. Then there are games where the narrative requires a firmer grip, like murder mysteries, where specific events have to happen for the game to progress. In these cases, the participants sometimes don't even make their own characters, having to follow specific steps to advance the somewhat on-rails story. In this metaphor, the organizers are the conductors of the train, making sure no arms and legs are outside the ride, slowing down, speeding up, and stopping at each station according to schedule. A lot of roleplay-oriented games fall somewhere between these two extremes, usually describing how certain events, traps, and puzzles work when interacted with, and narrating certain story elements, sometimes even working with the NPCs and players to weave the lore. Regardless of the type of game, there's always a warden, referee, storyteller, or someone involved to help keep things moving along. Whether it's a social conflict, narrative roadblock, or a rules dispute, they're there to keep the game going. In the end, that's what these rule keeper types all have in common. They're there to keep the game going. To help identify them, most of these people who strut around on the field like they own the place usually wear bright fluoro safety vests. I don't know how common it is, but it seems like a good way to indicate someone is in a position of authority that can easily be flagged down in case you need them for clarification on something, rules or otherwise. Also, it makes them easy to avoid if you don't want their gaze to follow you and tip someone off to the fact that you're around to do something sneaky. So now you know about game masters, referees, and wardens. Oh my, you're welcome. Oi, foul! You have to comment, like, and subscribe. Rules are rules, no back talking to the referee. Come on! Now, I know that's a bit of a long shot to get people to comment, like, and subscribe, but you know what else is a long shot? The subject for next week. Can you guess the topic? It's the Larp shot. Ever since the dawn of time, we have always sought to stab stuff. First we invented the knife because our clubs were too blunt. Then we invented spears to stab things that were slightly further away. Then we invented arrows to stab things even more far away, though that only took off after we invented the bow. Yes, that's how history went down. I historically tell facts and therefore am a historian. So let's get ready because I'm going to show you how to stab people far away at Larp. Now I know I mentioned stabbing and it should really go without saying, but don't actually stab people with pointy objects. This is a LARP, so only pretend stabbings are allowed. Your average LARP arrow will have its pointy, deadly tip replaced by a cushiony thing that'll turn a fatal stabbing into a long-range bop. Not only that, but most bows can only be used if they have a maximum poundage limit, pull limit, or draw weight. Actual wording may vary, but you're essentially setting your bows from kill to stun. Now, an actual archer in real life might already own a bow, and in theory could bring it to their local LARPs with the modified arrow tips and power adjustments. With their pre-trained skills, they could be a real terror on the foam sword battlefields. The only problem is that at most LARPs, you can't aim for people's faces and therefore can't arc your shots to go over their shields, making archers against certain enemies, groups, and situations, well, they put themselves at a great disadvantage. Sure, you can aim at their legs, and many do this, but a quick adjustment of said shield usually covers that vulnerability. A lot of LARPs compensate by making arrows hit for more damage, because otherwise they're kinda screwed, especially if your LARP has special attacks and spells. For example, if a swordsman uses a special move, they just have to yell out the name of their attack and strike. Should be easy enough to hear someone yell from sword swinging distance, right? A mage with a foam ball also has to yell out the spell's name and then hit someone. It's harder to hear, sure, but mages are nerds and all nerds can't they shout. An archer, on the other hand, they have to yell out their attack's name from arrow distance. Power shot! What? I said power shot! What? Power shot! Piece of what? Oh, screw it! Twang! Ow! I've just been hit by a regular shot for regular damage. You son of a... In conclusion, if you're an archer, then bring a backup weapon, at which point you stop being an archer and just a warrior who occasionally shoots people. So now you know how to take your shot in LARP. You're welcome. Next week we'll be talking about something that might be controversial. At least in a fantasy setting. Maybe? Can you guess the topic? Who's LARPing you?
Hello, fellow humans. As weak, fleshy meatbags, we dream of being more. Sometimes we dream of being other inferior meatbags that are somehow less inferior to the ones we are in reality. So get ready, because I'm going to show you how to LARP as a different kind of meatbag.
In most fantasy universes, humans are usually considered the most average race around, neither excelling nor lacking in any specific aspect. In others, we have the most drive and ambition, trying to accomplish more in the short lifespan that we have and becoming the main characters for just that reason. Or something special soul and plot armor. Either way, it means there's almost no reason to specifically be a human in most LARPs, at least from a mechanical point of view. Elves have sharper senses, which are sometimes represented by the ability to see invisible enemies. Orcs are stronger, thus given the ability to hit harder with their attacks. Dwarves are tougher and get more HP. Honestly, if your LARP is lazy enough and there are too many races to count, catalog, and make mechanical balance changes for, then they'll just give a universal HP bonus or quicker respawn speed to any non-human characters. For those that want to still include relatively unique bonuses and traits, some LARPs will give a list of player-only races that can be played. Sure, dragons might exist in the universe, but are relegated to the realms of NPCs and background characters. Another solution is to categorize and group some of these races and give bonuses based on that. Long-lived races get an extra skill point, while tougher races get more hit points and strong ones hit harder. Honestly, the lure of playing other races are so strong that some people are more than happy to roleplay all the associated weaknesses without actually getting any of the bonuses if the system doesn't support said mechanical bits. Like a vampire who can't be in sunlight, avoids garlic, and gets cross with crosses even if the rulebook doesn't tell them to do all that stuff. Dwarves, gnomes, and halflings aren't really easy to insert in LARP. If you want to be an elf, you add ears, orcs add green skin, and lizard people add tails which come off and regrow when they're threatened. For all the short races, it's hard to take away leg length, so most of these characters are either played by already short people like kids, or sometimes by normal people who claim to have drunk a giant's growth potion. So why play a human then? Now, I could tell you it's because they're the race we most identify with, that humans having so much drive can create a character who will want to do the most stuff in the world of your LARP. I could even tell you that people do it as an in-character decision to show that they are the most populous race in that universe. But the real reason why we play humans is because we're lazy and don't want to actually spend time putting on makeup, sticking in fake teeth, or gluing 2 ears onto our actual ears. So now you know about the different races in LARP and why you're probably going to end up choosing a vanilla human despite every other available flavor. You're welcome. Next week, the finale. We've been through a lot together, you and I, and we're going to help finish up together. Post-heart, post-break, post-LARP, post-hate. In the first season finale, I spoke about character death. In Season 2's finale, I covered boss fights. Both topics had something to do with endings. So what thematically appropriate topic have I chosen for Season 3? Well, I've decided to be slightly more meta this time and end things by teaching you what happens after the game, what we do post-LARP. So get ready, because we're going to show you how to LARP at the finish line. Now, I know some people say this a lot, but it's very important to hammer it into your thick skulls. LARP at its very core is a social activity that can't survive without its community. In a lot of cases, some people just go home after LARP to rest up after a full day of swinging foam swords, casting spells, and tripping over tree roots because fuck tree roots. Some people, however, breathe, eat, and live LARP and continue doing stuff for themselves and the community in between sessions, like making videos, crafting armor, looking stuff up online for ideas on how to craft armor in the first place, and failing that, just going online to buy whatever they were trying to craft in the first place. Sometimes they'll leave and work on an in-character letter that reflects the events of the session, or upload all those fancy photos they took of everyone for that game. However, what immediately follows LARP in some cases is what me and many of my local community call the emu walk. So for those of you who don't know, an emu is a large bipedal bird similar to an ostrich, local to Australia that... Okay, that's not relevant. Let's roll it back a bit. An emu walk is when everyone gets into a line shoulder to shoulder, at which point the organizers will yell at everyone to spread out more because people are terrible at following directions. After a bit more finagling, everybody looks down and starts walking, sweeping the field of battle for rubbish, stray arrows, and other pieces of lost equipment to help leave the area as they found it. Usually any tables or tents set up at this point would have already either been put away or put aside with all the other required admin stuff needed to have everyone start the game in the first place. Just watch out for the fucking tree roots. Another thing people like to do after LARP is that they like to stick around the venue for a bit longer, catching up on all of that out-of-character talk and gossip. Hey buddy, how's the baby? What baby? Sometimes they'll be gushing about in-character events that just happened. It was so cool when you stopped that cultist from stabbing the baby. What baby? Sometimes people will have to leave ASAP because their ride is here and they don't want to walk home or inconvenience the person who offered them the drive. Get in the car, baby. What baby? However, one of the most common things I've seen is the after LARP still in costume junk food feast at the local fast food joint activity, aka the ALSICJFFATLFFJA, or the ALSICJFA for short. Everybody loves a good ALSICJFA. To explain what this ALSICJFA is, everybody just rocks up, still in their armor, robes, and fantasy outfits at their local sugary, salt-laden grease traps and just gorge themselves. In the course of ordering their food and the actual gorging, they also do the talking thing I mentioned before. Baby, I love this burger. What baby? But everyone is different, and to prove the point, here are a bunch of testimonials, aka people I asked on Discord so I wouldn't have to keep writing the script. Umarel Fireseeker says, "Park up, talk to everyone about what was done well, their favorite moments, etc., etc. Then, as I'm an organizer, I usually go home and make up some sort of survey / do minor rules changes. Oh, and also everyone eats any uneaten food. Brackets. We eat in character, so we can't always eat between fighting. End brackets. Please send me the video when you're done if possible. Smiley face." Will do, buddy. I will definitely send you this video afterwards. Next up, we have someone named Toadstool Tarts. I hope that's how you pronounce it. And they say, "It depends on the game I'm going to. I just got home from Larping like 10 minutes ago, but after game of today, I checked out, cleaned out my cabin, and went to crack a barrel with my group. In brackets, there's one like 10 minutes from the campsite, so it's a bit of a tradition for us to go there after a game. End brackets. After that, I went home. I usually take an hour or two to chill and decompress, and then try to make sure my pal is finished by the end of the night so I do not forget anything." Just a quick note, a PEL, as referred here, or PEL, is a post-event letter. Think of it as a feedback form for LARP, usually covering in-character events and what they do outside the events covered in the LARP itself. It was sort of referenced by Umarel Fireseer above, and as always, there's a bit more to it than that, but I'm trying to keep this video short to match my attention span. Finally, I'm going to rest my vocal cords by playing a snippet from another fellow LARPing YouTuber. As in a YouTuber who LARPs, not a LARPer who only roleplays that they're a YouTuber.
And then the in-game hours have passed, and someone will yell, "Time out!"
Okay, this is taking too long. I don't have this kind of attention span. Wait, this goes on for another 2 whole minutes? This whole video is over 10 minutes! Okay, how does she know so much about life that she can talk about it for over 10 minutes in a single video? Okay, I'm calling it. I'm cutting this short before she shows me up any more than she already has.
But if you do have that kind of attention span, you can check out the full video.
Way too lazy to animate your lips, but you know, there's always more to learn. So that's the final episode. That's what we do post-LARP. And now, very soon, we're going to be doing stuff after this season, because, just like any good LARP session, this episode and season has to end. I'm going to leave, decompress, have some fatty food, and make videos about other stuff now. So now you finally know how to LARP in all things. You're welcome.